Awesome. So today I'm going to be going through how to write offers. So that's super important. Obviously, it's one of our most important documents that you guys want to get really familiar with. So I'm going to take a lot of time to go through that. So pieces of homework, and I'll say it again at the end of the class, is you want to get out a REPC and you want to go in the MLS, go find your dream home, find the MLS number, and write yourself up an offer. It's best if you practice this, because what I tell people, and I say this in all of my classes that I teach about writing offers, is practice, 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 because I promise when the buyer says, I want to place an offer, you will instantly go into panic mode. So we definitely want to make sure that you feel comfortable doing it, you know how to explain it. So it's just literally one of the most important documents that you have to understand inside and out. So make sure that you're practicing it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into, I'll share my screen and we'll go into the MLS. Is that Prabesh that just joined us?
Yes,
Good evening. Glad you made it.
good evening. Thank you.
Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. So I'm just going to go into the MLS. A lot of tabs open today. Okay, so in the MLS, what we're going to do, so if you are writing up an offer, more likely than not, you're going to have an MLS number. So you'll be able to take that MLS number and turn it into an offer. So what I'm going to do is grab one of my listings just for the sake of time, so I'm not searching for anything. So we are going to buy this house. So what I would do is you're going to take the MLS number and you're just going to copy it. And then we're going to go into forms. And everybody's going to teach you something a little bit different depending who's teaching this class. I still like to use the legacy forms, and then I use DocuSign. So in the legacy forms, we're basically looking for the REPC. And you can see I have it in there. You're going to search for that. We have a lot of things called REPC, so you just want to keep going down till you find the real estate purchase contract, and we're going to create a packet. So if you click on this little green button, we're going to start to create a packet. So potential things that we'll go through tonight, potential forms that you would need with the contract is the REPC first, and then you would also potentially need an addendum. So I'm definitely going to go through the addendum with you. And then depending on the type of loan, if we were doing an FHA, you can see this filter is my best friend here. So it helps navigate all of our forms. But if we were doing an FHA or a VA loan, you're definitely going to need that form too. So those are probably all that we're going to go through tonight. And so then you just click Create Packet. And here's where the MLS comes in handy. So we're going to click on this Auto Populate form. And then I'm going to put in the MLS number and then click Load. And you can see it loads all the information or a lot of the information straight from the MLS. So it gives you the address, it gives you the tax ID, it's going to give you what's included, what's excluded. So a lot of good information. I don't worry about like the buyer name. Is somebody talking to me? Maybe not.
Sorry, that was here. That was me. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So you can type in the buyer name here if you want and continue filling out these fields. I typically just copy, paste, and then click fill, upload. And once it's been uploaded, now you're going to remove this auto-populate box. So you're just going to click it again. And if I go too fast, please slow me down. Happy to answer questions along the way. So now we're just going to fill this out. So offer date, we're writing an offer today. And then you're going to put your buyer's name. So the buyer's name needs to match the pre-approval letter. So hopefully by this time you have a pre-approval letter. So as you can see, I have some auto-populated people. We're just going to use them tonight. But as you can see, I have Colby J and Michaela N. So if their pre-approval has their middle initial, we want to make sure it's on there. If their pre-approval doesn't have the middle initial, we don't want it on there. So we just want to make sure that when this contract hits the loan and hits the lender, everything matches. Otherwise, you can fix it. We would just be doing another addendum. to fix that. So Jesse, anything you want to say about the names and how that relates to the mortgage side? He's driving, so. Oh,
Yes.
there he is.
Sorry. I had a put
It's
my phone
okay.
on mute. But as far as names go, ideally we just go off whatever's on their ID, make it easy. So if they have the middle name or just the middle initial, put that in there just so everything is streamlined from the pre-approval letter with ID to the offer they made.
Okay, so also watch their ID for the names. And then other things like with names, as you can see, these people that I helped buy a house, they are not married, which is totally fine. So you're just going to put them, and use the word and. If they're married, it could be Colby J. Kirk, Michaela N. Kirk, or it could be Colby and Michaela Kirk. So there's a few different ways you can do it. I really try just to stick to the pre-approval letter just so that it's as close as possible, but just know we can change that if we need to. So the seller, if you go back to the MLS, and I should have kept it open, but you can always open a new tab. So I'm going to go ahead and open a new tab and hope I don't lose that document. And then I'm going to search for that MLS number that we're purchasing. So when you're on here, you can click on the tax ID number, and this will show you who the seller is. So as you can see, this is my own personal property. So you can just copy this if you want. And then you can just take it over here to the seller and paste it right there. So that's one way to get it. You can also ask the listing agent, hey, what is the seller's name? Other things that I will type on here is I will write owner of record if I can't find it, or say that the tax ID isn't very clear, and that does happen. So I'll do owner of record. What that's going to do is it needs to be accurate. So this will probably trigger an addendum during the underwriting process where we have to figure out who the seller is and put them there. But by that time, we will have the title report and we'll have a better either spelling or knowing of who that seller is. So a couple different ways you can do that there. Earnest money. So earnest money, the general rule of thumb is it should be at least 1% of the purchase price. So this is listed at $370. So that would be $3,700 if I were writing this up for my client. Now, it's a general rule. It doesn't have to be that way. It's definitely negotiable. So sometimes, especially first-time home buyers may not have an extra $4,000 in their account. So you could do $2,000 or $2,500. It's just the more the earnest money, the stronger your offer looks. So we'll put in our 3,700 here. And however you write the numbers, like I like to put the cents, you don't have to, you'll just kind of get into your own habits. And then here I do check or wire, because I may or may not know how the buyer wants to give me their earnest money yet. And depending on the amount, we can take a personal check. We can also take cashier's checks, and we can also take a wire. So within our command system, we do have an app, it's called Earnest. And so it basically will create a link and it will attach to the client's bank account and it will wire the money to us. So I think that's about a $15 charge, and it's super clean, super easy, and most of our clients prefer to use that. So that would be considered a wire. Any questions on earnest money? Okay. So moving along, you can see the property address did auto-populate. You as an agent representing, say, a buyer, you do want to make sure that's correct. Representing a seller, you do want to double check that, make sure it's correct as well. What we copy from the MLS is human input. I've heard many horror stories, knock on wood, I haven't done it yet, but I have heard horror stories of selling the wrong house, buying the wrong house, so it can be done. Usually a title report will kind of prevent that. If you have an address incorrect here, they're going to catch it, but double check everything. You really want to make sure everything's super accurate in this contract. So coming down here, included, it's really good for you to really know what's considered inclusions in a house, what is considered a attached to property. So a lot of times I see people fight over the kind of these end things like TV mounting brackets. So when you move your TV, you kind of want to take your brackets with you. Well, those are considered included property, so you can't. Mounted ceilings, speakers, those can become an issue. Garage door openers can become an issue, security system. So a lot of these things, I mean, a lot of us, I think we know like ovens are included. I've had many fights over water softeners, solar panels. So just make sure you really know what the contract is automatically including. And then if you need to exclude it, there will be a place down here that you can do that. So you can see that it auto-populated from the MLS what the listing agent was offering, and you can still go ahead and mark these. You can also change this out. So even though like right here, they've excluded the water softener, you can remove it and you can say that you want it included. So you can put it up here and say, I want the water softener. So really you're just asking the buyer, what do they want? Well, I want, I want the refrigerator, and you need to verify because when you look at this, refrigerator is plural. So I do like to get very specific on this. Dryers, washers, they are plural. So there's many houses that have laundry rooms on multiple levels. Maybe people have refrigerators in their garage. So just make sure you are, especially when you're a listing agent and you're receiving an offer, make sure you really clarify upstairs kitchen refrigerator included, downstairs refrigerator is excluded. Otherwise, I do see a lot of agents get into trouble and have to buy refrigerators, and we don't want you to have to do that. So just keep an eye on the inclusions and exclusions. This is where you would mark anything that's excluded. You can see I've written before right here. Washer and dryer located upstairs to be excluded. Tonal exercise equipment to be excluded, Murphy. So you can literally write up anything that you need to right here, because not everything is clear, but we want to make sure it's super clear. Water service. So this just basically says that it includes any water shares, anything like that. If there's any water rights or anything, that they will be transferred by a different document. So most of the time on just regular residential property, you're not going to be dealing with this. This would be more kind of in rural areas, or if there's any, like sometimes they have water shares, horse property, things like that. You'll pay more attention to the water. Purchase property. So we are going to assume that we are going to do a full price offer. So it's $370. And then you're going to put your earnest money here. And then additional earnest money through, when we get down in the contract, you'll be able to add additional earnest money. Typically when I'm working with a buyer, I'm going to put no additional earnest money. In the days where you're super competing and, you're fighting other people for properties, it may be valuable to do extra earnest money. But for the most part, I do not. So now we're going to start doing some math. And this is also where I see a lot of people mess up on this contract. So get your calculator out. It's totally fine. So we're going to go 370. It's good to ask your buyer or the lender, like, hey, how much money are they putting down for cash? So let's just say the lender tells me they're putting $25,000 down in cash, or let's do a percentage. We'll do 370. And let's just say that they're putting 5% down. So that's $18,500. So now what we have to do is we have to remove the earnest money or subtract it, because what's going to happen is at closing, their earnest money is going to be added with their cash to close to come up with that down payment for the most part. Different things can change, but when we're doing this math, that's how we're going to do it. So we're going to take the 25,000 minus 3,700. That is $14,800 that they're going to need to bring cash to close, cash at settlement. So you can see I'm working my math very much backwards. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the rest of this, do some subtraction to get the loan amount. So I'm going to do 370 minus 3,700 minus 14,800. That totals the new loan, which would be $351,500. We're not doing any seller financing, And the other thing to keep in mind is with all these boxes, I don't like to have any blank boxes anywhere. So either put an NA or put zeros just so that it's super clean. So now we need to add right here, there's kind of a little cheat sheet. So total of lines A through E should total this purchase price, and this purchase price should match this purchase price. But I'm going to work my math just to be sure my numbers are correct. And you definitely want to go through this more than once. Because like I said, it's very easy to mess up on this math. So 3,700 plus 351, 500. 3,700, 351, 500 plus 14,800 equals 370. So I did my math correct. I'm going to put the final number here. And then I'm going to make sure again that this number matches this number. Any questions on the math or the loan or anything? Okay. So you can see here in this line, if we are doing an FHA or a VA loan, we do have to include another addendum. So we're going to go over that in a minute, but just so you see that it does kind of remind you there that you're going to need to do that. So going down to section 2.2, sale of buyer's property. So this would mean, do they have to sell their other property before they can buy this? Either qualification reasons, maybe they're getting their down payment from the house. There could be many reasons why they have to sell their house first, but we do have to disclose that. So it either is or is not, preferably it is not conditioned upon selling another house. And if there is another addendum that would apply. So just keep in mind, it does tell you if you're going to need more addendums. Settlement and closing. So this just explains the difference between settlement and closing. And the biggest thing you need to know is that they are not the same. So when you go to closing and they sign the paperwork, that does not mean it's going to fund and record or that they're going to get the keys that day. Usually it takes anywhere from, I'd say, 24 to 48 hours to be safe on setting expectations so that your buyer can get the keys, 24 to 48 hours after. So if they're wanting to move in on the weekend, I'm trying to get them to close on Tuesday or Wednesday, just so I can be sure I can give them the keys on Friday. Possession. So this is basically when will they take possession of the property? Most of the time, I like to just put upon recording. So as soon as it funds, as soon as it records into the new buyer's name, they get the keys, they go over and they just take possession of the house. There will be times when that doesn't always make sense. So you could use this one that says, we're going to give them 48 hours after closing or after recording to give us the keys. You could do 72 hours, like you can do whatever you want there. We can also do calendar days. So you could also say, we're going to give them 3 days before they have to turn over possession. So whatever you want to put there, most of the time it's safe to put upon recording, but you will be negotiating this with the other agent. Proration. So this really starts talking about HOA. So this is super important if this property is in an HOA. You just want to make sure that you either know what these fees are, especially if you represent the seller. There could be special assessments that are on the property. As an example, some communities might be replacing roofs, or they might be making repairs on buildings, and the seller goes to sell the property and doesn't know that there's a $10,000 assessment on the property. This just happened with one of our agents. And so when it comes time to close, they get this big surprise that there's a $10,000 lien on the property that has to be paid before it can transfer hands. So seller maybe doesn't have the $10,000. It can put everybody in a bind. So it's just best to know this when you're representing a seller, that you know it upfront before you get into any kind of contracts. So just know that you can just contact the HOA. Your seller usually knows, they've been notified through a letter or an email. So just ask them when you list the property. But when I'm representing a buyer right here, I'm just going to put that I want the seller to pay for it. Really the only time I've ever put buyer or split equally is when I am competing with multiple offers. So I usually just put seller all the time. If it's not in an HOA, you can just write NA right here. Any questions so far on anything? Okay. We'll keep going. So this just kind of talks about if there's, if it's an investment property, there's any rents or deposits or anything, it just kind of goes through saying that what's going to happen with that. HOA, there's more on the HOA as far as fees. So when you're selling or buying in an HOA, a lot of them are going to have what they call transfer fees, or they're called so many different things. So they're called either transfer fee, reinvestment fee, community enhancement fee, like they can call them all sorts of things, but we really want to make sure we know what it's going to be and who's going to pay for it. So when I'm representing a buyer, I typically am always going to ask the seller to pay for it. But if I'm having to compete, then I might want to know what it is and say that the buyer's willing to pay for it, or we split it. When I represent the seller, it's super important that you know what this is. So as an example, like I live in Daybreak, and they have a 0.5% community enhancement fee. So every time a property is sold there, somebody has to pay 0.5%, which can be thousands of dollars. So if my seller did not know about that and I let them go under contract where it was marked seller, that could be a really big issue too. So assessments, any kind of reinvestment transfer fees are just something you need to be aware of when an HOA is involved. Going along, so it will auto-populate your agency information, your name, your license number, who you work with. Most of the time, most of the time it's not going to be both, is what I'm trying to say. So auto-populated both because I'm the listing agent of this property and I'm also, representing a buyer. So most of the time it's not going to be both. It's going to be somebody else. We're going to say Cody has this listed because he's in the listing mood. So, and that's also not his license number, but he is with Keller Williams. So this is a good scenario where we can say Cody represents the seller, and we'll put his license number in there. You can look this up on the division because we're not always going to know other agents' license number. We can look it up, or you can leave that blank. It's not that big of a deal, but it is good to, especially on a very common name, to have that license number there. And so seller's brokerage, so Cody and I work at the same branch. So it would be that the broker or brokerage is representing both buyer and seller as limited, even though Cody's representing the seller and I'm representing the buyer. So any questions on that? This looks kind of funny because we literally work in the same office, but you will come across this. So any questions here? Otherwise, you're going to just be able to, you'll have the listing agent that should auto-populate in there, and then you're going to type in your own information. So the next section talks about title and title insurance. So this just kind of explains who has to receive title, that the seller represents that the title is free and clear. If there's any kind of lease agreements or anything, the seller is responsible to make sure that those are out. Otherwise, if the buyer's buying it as an investment property, we want to make sure all of those things are transferred over. So we just want to make sure we handle any leases or any rental agreements prior to closing, really prior to going under contract. Same with short-term rental bookings. If you're selling an Airbnb or buying an Airbnb, this just talks about how we are going to handle those things. Seller's disclosures. So when you purchase a property, you're representing a buyer, you are going to be given seller's disclosures. And at that point, you are going to go through all of those with the buyer, give them to the buyer, let them review them. When you represent a seller, I always tell people go through this because this is what you will be expected to give to the buyer when you go under contract. So I like to just refer back to this section in the Rep C. So you're going to have written disclosures, possibly lead-based paint disclosures, title reports, CC&Rs, any HOA documents, any rental agreements, booking agreements. Like there's so many things you could have to disclose. This is just a really good place to come when you're listing a property. So Cody, you're listing a property. You want to make sure you have all these sellers' disclosures prepared or ready. You will need them basically before you go under contract. So you don't need them before you list the property, but you do want to have them prepared to give to the buyer when you go under contract. Okay, so then buyer's conditions to purchase. So due diligence. This is basically putting a condition in there so you guys can, do any kind of inspections. You can hire people. You can basically do all of this stuff, but it really is anything that the buyer wants to do to be sure that this is the home that they want. So I usually always put is conditioned. Even if it's a cash deal, I want to give the buyer, a few days or a week to do anything that they want. They can go back through the property, they can hire people, they can check, the internet, registries, schools, they can do anything they want to be sure that this is the home that they want. This kind of talks about how they have the right to cancel. As long as it's before the deadline, you will get the earnest money back. If it's after the deadline, then they will lose that earnest money. Appraisal conditions. So if they are getting a loan to purchase a home, which we've written this contract as though they are, then there will be an appraisal required. So you're going to put is, that their condition is on there. And this talks about the right to cancel again before the deadline. You'll get the earnest money back. If it's after the deadline, then the buyer will lose the earnest money. Financing condition, if they're getting a loan, then financing is required. So you want to mark is. If they're paying cash, it would be is not, but we are writing this as though they're getting a loan. Right to cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline. So this section is where you could put a portion of the earnest money as non-refundable after they do their due diligence. So if you wanted to kind of reassure the seller, hey, we're not going to back out. We just want to do our home inspection, and then we'll give you $2,000 of the earnest money as non-refundable, so you know we're going to keep moving forward. When I represent buyers, I don't do that very often because I really don't want to put their money at risk. So I'm just going to put 0 here. When we're in a super hot market, a lot of us did do this because that way we got at least a few days to do an inspection. But we basically guaranteed them that if we backed out, they would be getting a portion of the earnest money. And then it explains how it's given back to the seller. The next section is additional earnest money. So this one is talking about what we're doing with some or none of the earnest money we've already put down. This section is saying whether or not we're going to add more earnest money. So in this offer, we've written $3,700. We can say we'll give you another $5,000 just to sweeten the pot after we've done, the due diligence and appraisal and all of that stuff. We're going to give you more money just to prove to you that if anything goes wrong, you'll be making more money off of us. So right now, most of the time, I'm going to be putting zeros here because, again, I don't want my buyer's money to be at risk. So I'm going to put will not. Addendums. So we are going to say that there's an addendum in here because I'm going to show you a couple addendums. So if you're using addendum, you're going to say there are. And then we're going to go ahead and mark which addendum it would be. So we have an addendum number 1, and we also have an FHA loan addendum. If you're not using any addendums, you'll just mark are not, and nothing will be in there. Home warranty plan. So definitely, I see contracts it's probably more on buyers than sellers. So I wouldn't even say it's 50-50, but a lot of people are going to ask for a home warranty. So working with a buyer, I definitely ask them. So I will say a home warranty will be included, and it's going to be ordered by my buyer, and they're going to pick the company. So I put buyer, and let's say I'm going to ask for a $600 home warranty, but I want the seller to pay for it. So this is where you would ask them to pay for that. Otherwise, the buyer can pay for it themselves. We can include it, not include it. But right now in today's market, most people are getting those paid for by the seller. So I would go ahead and ask. This just kind of explains the property, like everything really is being sold as is. This settlement walkthrough, so your client will within 7 days of settlement, they can walk through the property, make sure any agreed upon repairs have been made, make sure the house is still in the same condition it was when they thought they were looking at it. It's really just to make sure nothing is wrong with the house since the client has seen it last. Changes. So this just goes through if there's any changes during the transaction. So a lot of changes that could happen is something happened to the property. Maybe they made alterations, but it's saying you're not going to do that. Financial encumbrances, you're not going to go take out any other loans. You're not going to get into any property management agreements. You're not going to sign any listing, any short-term, anything. So it's basically saying the seller agrees that we're not going to make any changes during the property, or excuse me, during the under contract time. This goes over authorities of signers. So we just want to make sure if they're in a trust or an estate or something that we know who is signing on this. And most of the time, the title company, if it's a partnership or a trust or something, they are going to require copies of like the articles of incorporation or something showing so we can verify we have the right people signing. The complete contract together with its addendum and everything included is considered a complete contract. Mediation, so if there was any kind of issue to arise during this, I like to say that we shall go to mediation. You'll hear both sides of that. So shall basically means that if everyone agrees to this and you have an issue with the contract, you have to go to mediation before you can start suing each other. And I know the stats are really high, but it's pretty high. Like 9 out of 10 mediations actually come to an agreement. And so it's typically hundreds of dollars, some hours, and then you come to a resolution. And mediation can be done in a real estate office with a broker. It doesn't have to be where you hire, you know, some attorney or something to do it, or a mediator or anything. It's just an agreed upon mediator. So this really eliminates a lot of headache and cost if there is somebody who's wanting to sue someone. And then the other side of that is if you mark may, then this is basically saying that if somebody wants to sue each other, that they can. I had a client once from New York, and he made it very clear. He's like, make sure if I ever want to sue anybody, I can. So that's kind of the mentality too, is I just figure, you know, if we get into an issue with this contract, the person with the most money or that wants to go to court is typically going to be the one who wins. Like nobody really wins when we sue each other. So that's why I personally like to put shall, but it's completely up to you guys and your clients. This goes over buyer default. So what happens if a buyer defaults, and really kind of a general rule is if the buyer defaults and you're within the time frames of your deadlines, they're going to get their earnest money back. If they default after the deadlines, then they're going to lose their earnest money. When it comes to the seller, it's very different. So what I like to tell my seller before I put them under contract is they really can't cancel this contract. It does say here that they are able to, but the repercussions are a lot worse for a seller than they are a buyer. So basically what happens if the seller defaults, the buyer has a chance to take their earnest money times 2. So the seller will pay them the equivalent of their earnest money back, plus an additional amount of earnest money. They can take that and agree to keep it, or they can say, we don't want your earnest money back. We're going to take you to court and sue you and force you to sell the house. So it's just easier for me to tell the seller right up front, make sure they know everything that's happening, let them know that they really can't cancel this the way that a buyer can, because a buyer can cancel for almost any reason, clear up until the deadlines and not lose any money. Attorney fees. So this just says if we do go into any kind of court or sue each other, you know, whatever party wins is going to be how kind of the attorney fees are paid. Notices, this just says if we give any notice, it must be in writing and it has to be signed by the person giving notice. So we all know all things with real estate have to be in writing. So just know that a notice works the same way. All of our contracts basically say that they cannot be assigned unless all parties have agreed to it. So this just automatically says no assignment. Insurance, so this just kind of covers what would happen if there is any kind of like act of God that happens, you know, the home is hit by an earthquake or flood or something like that. Who's responsible for insurance? Time is of the essence. So every deadline that we have is automatically written as 5 p.m. on the date that it's stated. So that is how it's going to be unless it's otherwise noted. So you can say, you know, we'll give you till 10 p.m. on Thursday, but if you don't say 10 p.m. and you just say Thursday, it's automatically 5 p.m. on that day. Electronic transmission and counterparts. So I basically just let my client know that we do a lot of docu-signing, a lot of electronic signatures, and that's fine. And that's what this says, is that it has the same legal effect as an actual pen signature. This talks about acceptance. So acceptance occurs only when and if all the following things have happened. So the buyer and seller have both accepted all the documents and the other party has communicated it to them. So you don't necessarily have to receive a copy of it back. You just have to be told, hey, the seller has signed this and I'm going to get it back to you. And as soon as it's been communicated that it's been signed and accepted, technically you're under contract. Deadlines. So deadlines, I'm just going to give you kind of general rules here. So jot these down. So seller disclosures typically are 3 to 5 days from when you think it will be accepted. So if I were writing an offer tonight on a Thursday night, I would assume, and I would also talk to the listing agent to be able to say, hey, when can you get me a response? Maybe they can get it to me tomorrow, or maybe they're going to do an open house and not tell me till Monday. So I'm going to try to figure that out. And then I'm going to calculate the dates based on when I think I'm going to get a response. So let's just say that they're going to respond to us on Monday. I would start counting my dates on Monday. So I'd go 1, 2, 3, 3 to 5. So you could do 3, you could do 4. I kind of like to judge this when I think I'm going to do the home inspection because we want to get the seller's disclosures before the home inspection. So let's just say that we want them by the 10th. And then due diligence is typically 7 to 10 business days from when you think that it's going to be accepted. So we believe we're going to get an answer by Monday. So I'm just going to start counting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So somewhere between 7 and 10. I don't like to ever make a deadline on a Sunday because it's pretty hard to get a hold of people. So maybe I would do like the 15th. Financing and appraisal is usually 15 to 21 days is kind of a good gauge. So I just kind of go 1, 2, 3 weeks. You also want to have your lender involved here. So make sure that, because depending on the type of loan, some can take longer, some can be done quicker. So I really want to talk to the lender and just say, hey, when would you prefer the finance and appraisal deadline? And they're like, oh, give us 2 weeks to get an approval, or give us 3 weeks, or they'll tell you where it needs to be. If I can't get a hold of the lender or I'm not 100% sure, then I'm just going to do like 3 weeks and I'll put that there. The other thing to keep in mind with these deadlines, and it's super important with the lender and it's super important that you're communicating a lot as throughout the process with the lender, because seller disclosure isn't that crucial, but due diligence is 7 to 10 days. You really want to move very fast when it comes to the home inspection, because if you take an entire week to do your due diligence, you've just taken an entire week of the lender's time to do their appraisal and loan approval. So you want to work really fast. I typically will tell my lenders, hey, don't order the appraisal until you hear from me, because I want to make sure that the inspection is going to go well. So the inspection can cost $400, $500, and an appraisal can cost $600, $700. So if we have an issue with the appraisal, I don't want my buyer to have to pay another $600 or $700 to back out of this, because now they've got their earnest money, now they've got their inspection money and their appraisal money. So you want to move very quickly. And then the second that I do the inspection and I know that everything's okay, then I'm going to tell the lender, hey, you're good to move forward. Go ahead and order the appraisal. So Jesse, I don't know, do you want to say anything about that?
I think you pretty much nailed it. I mean, we just wait for you to give us the go ahead on the appraisal, and then depending on how the market is, we're sitting, and which loan program it's sitting, between a week or sometimes 2 weeks, depending on like I said, time of market, how the condition of the market is, and then which loan program to get the appraisal. As far as deadlines, usually in the contracts, and you can probably attest to this, Terry, usually we'll see like a 30-day contract, but in more competitive markets, a lot of sellers or buyers like to submit offers with shorter deadlines. So we've got the ability to do little as 12-day contracts. We just need to get them what we call fast track, where they're pre-underwritten. If the client for some reason doesn't want to be pre-underwritten, which there's really no reason not to, but usually I can write a contract within 21 days and then try to close sooner than that, as far as deadlines, a settlement date goes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, I love that you guys have that option. So there's lots of different things, but again, that's why you have to stay in constant communication with your lenders. So you really know, like, it can help you be competitive too. So if everybody else is doing a 30-day contract and you're already fast tracked and everything, and you can get this done in 2 weeks, you're more likely going to win the contract. So Jesse and his team, they have awesome programs. So thank you. And then settlement deadline, I typically will do like maybe a week later just to get enough time for a week probably isn't completely necessary, but it'll just give you enough time to schedule your closing, make sure that the documents are ready to be signed because they do have to be, you know, ordered and printed up and sent to the title company. So sometimes it's hard to do it like the very next day. So I would probably do it maybe right here on the 1st. And the reason I'm doing it on the 1st is because it can take a couple days to fund and record, and most people want to have their keys for the weekend. So if I do Wednesday or Thursday, I'm pretty much guaranteeing that the loan will be 100% funded and we can get the keys by Friday. If you push it into Friday and it doesn't fund and record, you're waiting until Monday, and your clients will be begging you all weekend to get into the house. And that is no fun because we have to tell them no. Any other questions or comments on the deadlines? Those can be a little bit tricky. Really pay attention to holidays. I see a lot of people like months like July where there's 2 holidays in there, and months where we have, you know, a lot of bank holidays where things are closed. That can really mess things up. So just make sure you're paying attention to holidays. I really try to pay attention to weekends. I don't ever want to have a deadline, you know, like inspection on a Saturday night or a Sunday night where you can't get an answer. It'd be better to push it to a Friday or a Monday. So those would be my thoughts on that, is watch your weekends and watch your holidays when you're putting deadlines in. And then the next, offer in time for acceptance. So again, this is when I'm asking the listing agent, hey, when do you think you can get me an answer? And they're like, oh, I can get it for you in 24 hours. I'd say most of the time this is 24 hours, unless you're cutting it close to the weekend. Then a lot of times they're going to say, we're going to do an open house. We don't want to respond until Monday. So you could always put 5 p.m. on Monday if you wanted. But for the most part, I'd say it's 24 hours is a good time frame. So I'm going to say Monday at 5 p.m. that I want a response. So that is the REPC. That is writing out an offer. Do you have any questions or any other thoughts on this? No. Do you feel like you could do it? That's the bigger question. Do you feel like you could do it? It really is a lot of fill in the blanks, but it's just super important to know the reason and the why behind the blanks that you're filling in. So you'll hear agents just rattle off like section 8.1, 8.3b. So you want to get that good at this, that when somebody says to you, yeah, what did you mark on 8.3b? You know exactly what they're talking about. So really memorize this contract. So the next form that we would be using in this scenario is addendum number 1. So the nice thing about this addendum, it does give us the ability to add maybe some of our own terms in here. So we could, I don't know, I can't even think of any terms off the top of my head, but it could just be like, we're adding JoJo to the contract, which is maybe like the mom, or we need to change the name. The buyers are now going to be this and this. So you can type up kind of your own thing if you needed to. But there's also a lot of these clauses in here. So the first addendum obviously is going to be addendum number 1. It's going to be marked here as an addendum. The top part, you're filling out the exact same as the offer. This wants to auto-populate for me. Right there. So it'd be today. And then you're going to put in the buyer's name and the seller's name. I'm doing this a little bit faster. And then you can see that the address already auto-populated in here. So things that would be required on this, say that you're asking for closing costs to be paid. And again, the lender is going to be the one to tell you if you need closing costs paid and how much. So you definitely want to ask them when you're out shopping or getting ready to write an offer. So one way we can do that is you can grab this clause and you grab it and you pull it over here to selected clause, and then you click load selected clauses. So this is how it creates other types of addendums. So that's why I like the blank one, because it can make a lot of different addendums, and it puts all the verbiage you need in here. Otherwise, if you're just typing up seller to contribute $5,000 for buyer's closing costs, it's not as thorough as what the verbiage here says. So you really want to use the clauses whenever you can. So say that Jesse says we need $10,000 in closing costs. We're going to put that right here. Other things that you could use, and you can use multiple clauses too, just so you know. So as an example, this is my own personal property. So I would have to disclose that to anybody. So if you come in here and type in the word interest, so disclosure of interest, I'm going to pull that over here and I'm going to load it. So now this will become, I think it will go section 2. Let's see. Yeah, so section 1 is going to be the closing costs, and section 2 is disclosing that I am either a relative or I'm actually the seller of the property. So just know when you are either representing a buyer you're related to, or you're buying a property, or you represent the seller, anytime that there's any kind of personal interest, we have to disclose it. So in this case, I would say the seller is a real estate agent. And now I've disclosed that. But those are kind of some of the most common things you're going to see here in this addendum. Otherwise, it's just used like now, if I wanted to do an additional term, you have section 1. Oops. You have section 1 here. You have section 2 here. And now I'm going to build a section 3. So we could say, sometimes you want to put something like earnest money to become non-refundable upon acceptance or something. I mean, this is just where you can type in any other terms that you want to use. So I just wanted to show you how you'd use this addendum. You can type in it, you can put a clause in it, either way. So any questions on this addendum or how it can be used? And then this down here is going to match the Rep C. So we're going to say seller has until 5 p.m. on Monday. And then you're going to get them to sign it. Any questions on that? You would use this closing costs if they were doing like a conventional loan. If they're doing an FHA loan, then we're going to need to use the next form that I wanted to show you. And again, you're going to know this by talking to the lender. So this could be FHA loan addendum 1. It could be addendum 2, depending on how we use the last addendum. But you're just putting these in order, however you need to. So here you can see it auto-populated the address again. You're going to go ahead and put the buyer. You're going to put the seller, put the date of the offer, which is today. And then you're going to say, you know, if they're applying for FHA or VA, we're going to say this is an FHA loan. And then this is going to just talk about the earnest money, how that's going to be handled. When you do an FHA loan, it does require a little bit more of an inspection during the appraisal. So the appraiser can come in and require specific repairs to be made. And it's usually safety items like missing screens, broken windows, handrails missing, maybe like the steps are out of code. So it's usually a safety item. So you can come in here and just say, if anything comes up, I want the seller to make any repairs, but I'm not going to ask them to do it above $500 or whatever you think that it's going to take. FHA is also going to require that the seller furnish a termite report to be done. So I usually put around $100 in there. And then this is where you're going to put seller is going to contribute closing costs. So if you're doing an FHA or VA, you wouldn't use the other addendum. You would use this one to ask for closing costs. So in this scenario, Jesse has told us we need $10,000. So I'm just going to put that right here. And then the bottom of this is just going to be the same. We're going to have it match. Seller has until 5 p.m. to respond by Monday. Any question on that addendum? Those are the two most common addendums you'd be using. Okay, so that's basically writing an offer. A couple other things. So we have about 7 minutes left. So I just want to show you. So basically at this point, what I would do is I'm going to turn this into a PDF document. So I've created the packet. These are the addendums I want to use. I'm going to generate PDF. And it's just going to, I'm going to download it to my computer. And then I'm going to upload it into our DocuSign. So DocuSign, this is another thing where people really start to panic if they haven't ever seen this before. I'm just going to call it just an offer. If they haven't seen it before. So you want to make sure you know how to use DocuSign. So everybody does get a DocuSign account with KW. So I use the forms from the MLS and then I go straight into DocuSign. There are other ways to do this. You can create an opportunity within Command and you can create a DocuSign room inside of Command. I just find that it's quicker and easier for me. That's probably my habit, is to create it right in the MLS, download it, and just upload it to DocuSign. And then when I'm ready with everything that's signed, then I create my whole file in Command. So you'll kind of figure out what you like best as far as the system that you use. But I just want to make sure you know how to use DocuSign. And you can play around with DocuSign. It's yours. You can use it for personal reasons, for anything. So just practice uploading documents and putting signatures on them. So basically here is my DocuSign. So I'm going to click on Start and I'm going to send an envelope, which basically means I'm creating an envelope and I'm going to send it to my buyer to sign this. So I'm going to click on Upload. I'm going to go to my computer and I'm going to grab the offer and I'm going to just click Open. It's going to come in here. You'll see the PDF that we're going to sign. And now we need to add the recipients of who's going to sign it. So here you're going to put in the buyer's name. So just for the sake of time, it's going to be me for a second. So you'll put in their name and then you'll put in their email. You can add husband, wife. Why it keeps taking my name out. Husband, wife, whatever, but any signature, any person signing needs to be on here. So you can add a second party if you need to, or it can just be one party, however you have it. And then you can put a message here. I personally don't put messages. I just send it the way it is because my client knows that they're getting something. So I just say, watch for a DocuSign, but you could change this and you could say your offer to sign or whatever you want. And then you could say, Mr. Buyer, please sign this document. So you can make this as custom as you want. My personality is to move a little quicker and I just hit send. But you're going to hit next. And then here is where you are going to insert initials and signatures. So initials, we're representing a buyer right now, and the buyer happens to be Terry. So we're just going to grab the initial and you put it here, and then you put the date. So there's a lot of tricks you can learn to DocuSign. So you can come down here and you can do this again. Or you can also do this. So I'm taking my mouse and I'm building a little box around it and I'm going to copy. And then I go to the next page. It gets tricky, so you kind of have to practice this too. Click on the page and then I'm going to paste it there. So then it just goes right there. So then I can do it again, go to the next page, paste. Oh, see, so you have to click it. Even I still mess this up. So it went somewhere else. So now I got to go find it where it went. So you can see there's two of them here. So you can just delete it. But if you don't hit the page just correctly, it's not going to go on there. There we go. So then here we have a signature, not just an initial. So you want to make sure you get that on there. And then I'm going to go down here. We're going to paste another one. And then we're going to go to this addendum, which also requires a signature. So you're going to put the signature there, the date, and you never want to leave the check boxes blank either. So you can see there's a buyer and a seller checkbox. This is also a little bit tricky. So you're going to move the checkbox over. So this is our buyer. The checkbox has been placed, and now you have to go over here to the right-hand side and click on checkbox value and check the box. Kind of a crazy little step. And then you're going to, so this initial doesn't have a date, so I'm just going to drag it over instead of doing the copy paste. Then the next addendum, same thing. So I could do another paste if I want. And you can move it around so you can see that's didn't go exactly where I wanted it to go. And then here's another signature with another checkbox. Check it. And then usually initials on the bottom of everything. So you'll get really good at this, but for the first few times, this will take you a good hour or so just to send a DocuSign. So you really want to practice it now. And then all I would do is hit send, which I'm not going to do because I don't actually want this to go to anybody. So I'm just going to delete this. We're going to go back and delete. But any questions on DocuSign or how we're going to get this offer over to our people? Hopefully clear as mud. So I'm going to go back. You can just delete this. So I'm going to delete the document. Delete, saying everything's going to be lost, which is totally fine. And we're going to cancel out of here. So that's also how you just get out of that DocuSign. Okay, you guys, well, it's 6:30, so if nobody has any other questions, on any topic, doesn't necessarily have to be writing up the offer, but any other topic or anything else you have questions on? I have to drop. Okay, awesome. Cody dropped. Try to check the chat. Sorry, I'm all slow. Okay, so it was just him. Okay, you guys, well, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I know several of you are new, so I appreciate you being on here. This will be recorded, so we will send it out to you and add it to the library. So if I went a little fast or you weren't able to take notes, you can definitely watch it again. But thank you. Have a good night. So just as far as tomorrow is concerned, we will have our 8:30 call. Tomorrow's Friday, so that's basically all that we have. Tomorrow is our 8:30 call, and otherwise I'm just available for you to text, call, or email if you need any help. Thank you.
Thanks,
Have a good
Terry.
night. You're welcome. Bye, Jesse.
Right.
Thanks, Terry.
You're welcome. See you later.